Mercedes halts orders. BMW freezes production. Volkswagen cuts from the US market list. A direct blow to the automotive industry and to the states that once depended on it. Each shift supports a family. Each sound of the machine is the heartbeat of the community. But today, all that remains is grass growing and a Felice sign turned upside down in the June heat. They didn't go bankrupt. They were not expelled. They withdrew themselves because they no longer believe that America is a place worth investing in. And the most painful thing of all, no one has the strength to be surprised anymore. This is not just a story about cars. This is a domino chain reaction. From the assembly line to the supermarket checkout, from the factory to your home. When the German giants turn their backs, tens of thousands of Americans lose their jobs, and at least 15 states are on the brink of collapse. From Michigan to Alabama, from assembly centers to export ports, which states are suffering the most? And what has caused America to be controlled by the very companies that once saw us as a golden market? Let's start today's list with a state that was once considered BMW's backyard, but is now becoming eerily quiet, and that is South Carolina. They didn't inform us. They didn't apologize. They just gradually disappeared. The BMW factory that used to shine 24/7 in Spartanburg is now facing the risk of going dark as if it never existed. There was a time when this place was the pride of the entire state of South Carolina. Every morning, hundreds of workers' cars lined up on the I-85 highway. The breakfast spots around the factory are packed with people, and children grow up dreaming of working at BMW like their parents. But then, the chain came to a halt. The night shift disappeared. The contracts are suspended. No press, no warning, just an internal notice posted in the corner of the break room. Production suspended indefinitely. A 59-year-old man, once a shift manager, now delivering pizzas to make ends meet. He said, "I have worked here for 26 years. They didn't fire me. It's just that they don't need me anymore." You are not the only one. In the past 12 months, South Carolina has lost more than 7,800 direct and indirect jobs related to BMW and the German supply chain. A series of stores have closed down. One school merged classes because there were not enough children. What few people know is that BMW did not withdraw because of losses. They withdrew because the US is no longer attractive. High labor costs, threatening import taxes, and policy instability. Germany chooses Mexico. Hungary, cheaper, more stable, with more incentives. The tax incentive contract that once kept BMW there expired in 2022. But no one renewed it. No one negotiates. No one cares anymore. Recently, a group of former BMW engineers in Spartanburg are forming a repair cooperative, turning an abandoned factory into a vocational training center for electric vehicles. They said, "If foreign countries abandon us, then we must not abandon each other." If a giant like BMW can leave so quietly, then what is permanent in a town in America today? But if you think South Carolina is bad, just look at what's happening in Alabama, where Mercedes-Benz once promised never to leave. A town that once thrived on the sound of machines, now lives on the sound of size. Tuscaloosa, once chosen by Mercedes-Benz as its home in America, is now just a forgotten address. In the past, Mercedes-Benz not only produced cars in Alabama, they created an entire middle class. Nearly 5,000 workers are directly employed, with thousands more relying on ancillary services, from forklifts, warehousing, to the breakfast cafe near the factory gate. But then everything slowed down. The night shift was cut, the production line slowed down, and the warehouse was closed. Not a single press conference, not a word of thanks, just the workers, not being called back. A 58-year-old woman, who used to be a shift supervisor, recounted, "I worked there since my child was in kindergarten. Now, I live stream selling t-shirts online to try to keep this roof over my head. No one said I was fired, they just no longer call me by my name." Just this year, more than 4,300 direct and indirect jobs around the Mercedes plant in Tuscaloosa have disappeared. Many people do not qualify for unemployment benefits due to temporary contracts. A long line of old cars queued up in front of the free food distribution center. Among them were people who used to drive Mercedes, bought with their own factory wages. Perhaps Mercedes is not abandoning Alabama for technical reasons, but because they are prioritizing production at their factories in Berlin and North Africa, where costs are 38% lower. Additionally, concerns about the legal environment and the unpredictable tax policies in the US make German corporations want to avoid risks. In 2019, Mercedes announced that it would expand this factory until 2040. But by 2024, the expansion was indefinitely postponed. No one explained, if a promise from Mercedes can depreciate so quickly, then which promise is still strong enough to nurture hope for the next generation? Recently, a local fund was established by the former workers themselves to transform the abandoned accessory factory into a new vocational training center. They don't need a miracle, they just need a real opportunity. But if you see Alabama as a crack, then Mississippi is crumbling, where the closure of a VW parts factory has plunged an entire town into darkness. No one is shouting, no one protested. It's just that each family quietly loaded their luggage into the car and drove away with no promise of return. In Jackson, Mississippi, a factory that produced electronic components for Volkswagen for nearly 20 years. Each month, over 400,000 sensor sets were shipped to VW factories across the United States. The town thrived on the sound of that machinery. Now, it is only the sound of the wind howling through the rusty iron gates. There was a time when young people here didn't need a university degree. Just 1 year of vocational training is enough to get a job, a salary, insurance, and hope. They call it the new pride of Mississippi. In just 8 months, Jackson lost over 3,100 jobs related to this factory. According to a report from the State Department of Labor, petty crime rates in the area have increased by 27%, mainly involving the theft of food, fuel, and household items. An apartment complex that was once bustling with young workers now has "for rent" signs on every floor, trash covering the hallways, and the lights no longer shine at night. The state government seems to have received warnings since mid-2021 that Volkswagen would reduce orders in the US and move production lines to the EU. But there were no contingency plans, no investment in transition, just empty meetings and promises of not being a cause for concern. A leaked internal report from 2022 shows that VW no longer considers Mississippi a potential area for workforce and infrastructure. And what's even more unfortunate is that the people were not informed. And if a state once had a chance, but let it slip away in silence, whose fault is it? And how many more Mississippis are waiting for their turn? Not wanting to waste any more time waiting in vain, a group of students and local former engineers are developing a small-scale green technology project on the site of the old factory, collaborating with solar energy startups. Even though it only created a few dozen initial jobs, it was a small ray of hope, enough to restore some trust. But what is happening in Georgia is not just job loss, it is the loss of 3 generations of trust. You won't believe what's happening in a place once called the new land of the German automotive industry. There are lands that were once good enough for 3 generations of a family to work together in a warehouse. But then, just one autumn, all 3 were unemployed, and Georgia is a prime example. There used to be more than 2,000 stable jobs here, mostly warehouse workers, drivers, and crane operators. Older people call this a respectable job, while younger people refer to it as a ticket to life without needing a university degree. Every morning, 2 generations drive together to the warehouse. Every evening, they have dinner together with the salary from the container route. But sadly, now all 3 generations, grandfather, father, and grandson, are unemployed. The warehouse is silent. The port is deserted. A 63-year-old man said, "I've been working here for 30 years. My son has been here for 18 years. My nephew has only been here for a year. I used to think I would retire here. Now I'm packing up to leave the state. If all 3 generations are removed from a system they once built, then what can we still trust in the long term in this economy? In 10 months, Georgia lost more than 5,200 indirect jobs related to the logistics systems of German car manufacturers. Container shipping revenue at the port of Savannah fell nearly 19%, the lowest level since 2011. German car manufacturers are significantly reducing their dependence on maritime and road logistics in the US. They prioritize intra-European or Mexican supply chains, where transportation costs are 40% cheaper and regulations are less volatile. Georgia once signed a contract to expand its container yard with the expectation of doubling its capacity by 2026. But just 1 year later, DHL's parent company quietly withdrew its investment. No press conference, no reason, just a withdrawal. Some local logistics organizations are proposing to convert the old warehouse area into a vocational training center and a federal emergency logistics center, based on the model in North Carolina, although slow. But it's not impossible. But Georgia is not the state most heavily affected. In Indiana, when the last brake parts were shipped from Germany, a whole chain of auxiliary factories fell into a domino collapse. Let's see what is making this place more precarious than ever. At Elkhart and Fort Wayne, Indiana, dozens of small factories specializing in the production, assembly, and testing of brake systems for cars imported from Bosch, Germany, used to operate year-round. Each factory was a link in the modern manufacturing system, once known as the second Detroit of the Midwest. In 2005, every street near the industrial zone had lunch shops serving workers. Every evening after work, there are the sounds of horns, laughter, and air conditioners releasing steam. Now, 2 out of 5 shops have closed. The parking lots are empty, the factories are covered in dust, and many streets no longer have their lights on at night. A 67-year-old restaurant owner shared, "I have been living off the workers who have lunch here for 25 years. Now, my busiest day is Tuesday, when the nearby food bank distributes free meals." In less than a year, more than 3,800 workers at brake parts plants in Indiana lost their jobs, mainly because Bosch reduced import orders from Germany to the US. A large portion of them are middle-aged workers. Nearly 60% are aged 45 and older. Bosch has restructured its entire supply chain, prioritizing factories in Europe close to car production sites, and moved auxiliary lines to Mexico, where import taxes are lower and operating costs are 35% cheaper. Indiana, once an attractive destination due to cheap and easily trainable labor, is now considered high cost and low stability. Notably, a memorandum from 2021 shows that the state of Indiana once rejected a proposal to improve domestic transportation infrastructure, a key factor that led Bosch to remove this destination from the global supply chain map. If a small break can cause an entire production system to collapse, then how many more weaknesses like this are there in this economy that we haven't noticed yet? In difficult times, an alliance of small factories is transitioning from manufacturing automotive components to processing medical equipment and energy devices. Some former engineers have started vocational training for local youth, with support from a regional non-profit organization. Next, let's go to Texas, where VW once placed great trust in the Houston logistics system, and now they have moved everything to Mexico. What are the consequences? Let's face it head on. A transportation system that used to be busy 24/7, now only the sound of metal chains hitting empty containers remains. Texas was once a strategic destination for Volkswagen. Now they have chosen Mexico and turned their backs without looking back. In 2018, Houston was ranked among the top 3 most dynamic ports in North America by Global Trade magazine. In 2025, the southern container yard of the port was completely empty. Cargo trucks were covered in dust, and the port lights were only turned on for 8 hours a day instead of 24. A 41-year-old legal immigrant who worked as a stevedore for VW at the port for 11 years shared, "I worked hard, never took a day off. Now, I live in an old van, parked near a church, because I have nowhere else to go." In just 9 months, Volkswagen's transfer of all logistics from Houston to Veracruz, Mexico, has caused Texas to lose more than 6,200 jobs directly and indirectly related to the German automotive supply chain. The homelessness rate in Harris County increased by 18%, particularly among the group of Latin male workers from the logistics sector. Volkswagen made the decision to leave Houston after transportation costs, warehousing taxes, and disruption risks due to import policies increased by more than 22% over 3 years. Additionally, the lack of investment in inland port infrastructure, along with federal legal barriers, has completely eroded Houston's competitive advantage compared to emerging ports in Mexico. Notably, the Texas government spent over $250 million to expand the Houston port system in 2020 to retain German corporations. But just 4 years later, the project was abandoned, and the containers are now being loaded at the port of Veracruz. If even Texas, with its ports, incentives and trust, couldn't keep Volkswagen, then which state is strong enough to hold on to foreign giants? A group of local carriers is building a transportation platform that combines agricultural, medical, and federal logistics to diversify the Port of Houston away from automobile dependency. Some new routes have started operating, albeit small, but they are purposeful steps. But if you think Texas is just losing shipping, take a look at what's happening in Tennessee, once dubbed the new Detroit of the South. And now, no more closing whistles. Tennessee was once the shining star of the Southern American automotive industry. Thanks to the supply chain linked with German giants like Volkswagen and Bosch, many people call Chattanooga the new Detroit, a place that has revived faith in American manufacturing. In 2010, the German car company sponsored the summer festival for the whole town. Dazzling fireworks, university scholarships, investment in technical schools. In 2025, that very festival was cancelled because there were no more sponsors, and too many families had to leave. No bankruptcy, no scandal. It's just one contract cancelled after another, one production line halted, until the entire town has nothing left to operate. In just the past 12 months, more than 3,900 workers in the Chattanooga area have been laid off or forced into temporary leave. The mid-year school transfer rate for students in the area has increased by more than 23% due to parents losing their jobs and having to move. Volkswagen once planned to expand its electric vehicle production line in Tennessee. But after a series of risks related to import taxes, rising labor costs, and concerns about political instability, the company moved its factory to Hungary and Mexico. Tennessee couldn't keep them, even though it used to be where they placed their trust. A report from local authorities in 2022 once warned, if the training model is not reformed, Tennessee will lose the next generation of manufacturing engineers. But no one took action. And now, that warning has come true. How many towns in America still believe that industry will save them, while global corporations have chosen other places to invest their future? But what is happening in Tennessee is not yet the bottom. In Ohio, when both Bosch and ZF closed down, not only jobs disappeared, but the American middle-class dream also faded with every truck leaving the factory. Ohio, when the middle-class dream fades away in the sound of the machine. Dying Down, Ohio used to be one of the most important production hubs for components and drivetrains for the German automotive industry in the United States. Two major names, Bosch and ZF Friedrichshafen, operate many factories in Dayton, Toledo, and Cleveland, creating thousands of stable jobs for the middle class. Since the beginning of 2024, Ohio has lost more than 5,200 direct jobs from the two companies Bosch and ZF, not to mention thousands of other auxiliary jobs. The entire city of Lima lost 17% of its total local budget revenue, just because one ZF factory closed. Bosch and ZF are scaling back in Ohio because their supply chains are moving closer to the European market, where cars are produced and consumed more heavily. Additionally, labor insurance costs in the US have risen by more than 22% over the past 5 years, leading German companies to believe that the US is no longer a friendly assembly market. In a closed hearing, a ZF leader once told the city council, If we pull out, another company will take our place. 3 years later, the factory site remains abandoned, and that promise is no longer mentioned by anyone. If even the engineering sector, which once ensured stability for the middle class, is no longer a pillar of support, then is there anything certain in America today? A group of former engineers and vocational teachers are collaborating with the state university to launch a skills transition program for the 40-plus generation. Many are learning how to operate clean technology production equipment, catering to new demands in the energy and healthcare sectors. Next, let's go to North Carolina, once the busiest transit hub in the Southeast. Now it has become an old trailer parking lot, abandoned by everyone. What caused the entire state to fall into oblivion? Not the factory closing, not that production has stopped, it's just that the containers no longer arrive, and the state is gradually falling into oblivion. That is the story of North Carolina at the moment. Although this state does not directly produce German cars, it serves as a strategic transit hub for the entire Southeast region. Now, the parking lot has become a yard for old trailers. Grass grows through the rusted tire tracks. A few retired drivers park there, not to deliver goods, but to live. In just 10 months, North Carolina lost more than 4,000 jobs in the logistics sector, serving imported cars from Germany. Many small transportation companies went bankrupt. A portion of the federal rail line connecting Charlotte and Savannah has been completely cancelled. German car manufacturers have changed their distribution system, withdrawing inventory in the US and prioritizing production and distribution within the EU, or shifting to cheaper ports in Mexico and Canada. North Carolina, once the focal point, has now become the neglected periphery. This state was once promised to become a regional transit hub with federal investment. But the 2023 budget was cut, and instead of expanding, the project was indefinitely shelved. No one mentioned the reason, and if a state does not produce, but is still paralyzed just because the flow of logistics has changed direction, then how many other places are standing on the sidelines of the global game without even knowing? Recently, some old logistics hubs are being repurposed by startups into distribution centers for agricultural and medical products within the state, with the participation of non-profit organizations and cooperatives. Although they are still in the pilot phase, at least the wheels have started turning again. But if North Carolina still has a chance to pivot, Kentucky is being bled from within. A state that was once a silent link for Mercedes, now living in a state of waiting for the official day of abandonment. In Kentucky right now, no one is saying it out loud, but everyone can feel it. The sound of the machine is fading. The shifts are being shortened. The shops around the factory are closing one by one. And then, all that was left was to wait for the final announcement to come. In the past, the industrial zones in Kentucky were bustling with 3 shifts a day. Young people started working right after high school. Older people stay until they retire. Now, there is only one morning shift left. Many production lines have been idle since February. Workers go home without changing clothes because they no longer sweat. Since mid-2024, Kentucky has lost more than 3,100 jobs in the German automotive supply industry, mainly in small and medium-sized enterprises. The number of food stamp applications in Warren County increased by 32% over 6 months, despite no official shutdown event. Mercedes-Benz doesn't need to close the auxiliary factory, just stop placing orders. The reason is that they moved the production of those components to Turkey and Poland, where labor costs are only 40% and the import incentive policies are more stable. One of the major suppliers in Kentucky once signed a 10-year contract with Mercedes, but the fine print included a clause. Orders could be cancelled at any time if the distribution strategy changed. They didn't expect it. It happened in the 4th year. If a community only knows how to live in the mindset of waiting to be abandoned, then is there any hope that does not come from within themselves? One of the most important hubs of the German automotive industry in the US has been sold. No press release, no community meeting. It just disappeared, as if it had never existed. From 2014 to 2021, Missouri, particularly the St. Louis and Kansas City areas, was likened to the inland gateway for the German automotive industry. Here, American logistics companies transport parts, imported cars, and equipment for BMW, Mercedes, and Volkswagen from the ports to the factories inland. However, in 2025, the company sign was removed overnight, and a few weeks later, this place was owned by a Chinese logistics corporation. After one of the major carriers withdrew contracts with BMW and VW, Missouri lost more than 3,700 jobs in the automotive logistics sector in just 6 months. The bankruptcy rate of small transportation businesses in the St. Louis area increased by 21%, according to a report from the State Department of Commerce. The withdrawal of German giants from the US market is not just about manufacturing, it's about changing the entire logistics network. The Chinese logistics group acquired the Missouri transshipment facility for 40% less than its construction value and is converting it to serve China-US trade routes. In 2020, Missouri proposed a $200 million incentive package to retain European partners in the logistics industry. But after the pandemic, the budget shifted towards medical relief, and the incentive package was never signed. When even a transit center, once connecting millions in imports and exports, can disappear without a word, how many silent links are breaking apart? And if you think Missouri was passive in the collapse, look at Illinois, where the service chain surrounding the German auto industry once supported thousands of families. Now, as the German companies withdraw, those families are living off food stamps, right in the heart of a once prosperous state. Illinois, especially the suburban Chicago area and the Joliet industrial zone, used to be the logistics service belt, serving the supply chain for imported cars from Germany. Although not directly producing, but thriving on, in 2017, the service area near the largest BMW dealership in Chicago operated from early morning until late at night. In 2025, 4 out of 7 service shops had closed. A restaurant that opened in 1988 has a for rent sign. The former owner is now queuing at the district food distribution center. In just the past 12 months, more than 6,000 jobs in the automotive support services sector in Illinois have disappeared. The rate of food assistance program usage increased by 19% among the workforce that once belonged to the stable but not rich class, those who were not poor enough to receive help, but also not rich enough to stay afloat. When German car manufacturers withdraw from the US market or cut imports, they are not just leaving the factories, they are also taking the surrounding service chain with them. Illinois, which once benefited from a high-end dealer distribution maintenance system, is now falling behind in the global value chain. The state government once proposed a strategy of service replacing production to develop post-industrial Illinois. But they did not foresee that if the industry pulls out, then the services, who will they rely on? If an ecosystem that once thrived by serving people with German cars now has to queue for free food, has the follow-the-leader economic model reached its end? Germany did not declare war on the United States. They just quietly withdrew. But the way they withdrew, and the price that these 15 states are paying, speaks to a deeper truth. We are no longer a priority choice. You may not live in South Carolina, Alabama, or Indiana, but what is happening there? Sooner or later, it will affect you, the community you live in, and your descendants. When the big players withdraw from America, what is left behind is not just the supply chains, but also the shattered towns, the crumbling trust, and the dreams melting away in silence. What do you think? How many other states are living off an industry they can't control? Is America still a place where the world wants to invest? And if it's not the people here who will lift it up, then who will? Please leave a comment. We want to hear your experiences and thoughts, especially if you have lived in these quietly disintegrating industrial communities. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you want to continue following in-depth, reflective analyses, but always with hope, about the America that is changing every day. This video is based on economic reports, labor data, and public information from press sources and non-profit organizations. All analyses and opinions presented in the video aim to raise community awareness and are not intended to target any specific business, organization, or government. We encourage the audience to exchange opinions in a civilized and responsible manner, because the truth always has many facets.